For nearly 1,000 years, it has haunted the Western imagination. A single object imbued with divine power. The cup that caught the blood of a dying God. The vessel of the Last Supper, the Holy Grail. Legend whispers that to drink from it is to have eternal youth. To possess it is to hold the secrets of heaven and earth. And for centuries, this sacred quest has been inextricably linked to one name: the Knights Templar. We see them in our mind's eye, stoic warriors in white mantles bearing the crimson cross, the sworn guardians of Christianity's greatest secret. They are the keepers of the Grail, the protectors of a divine lineage, the silent masters of a truth too powerful for the world to know. But what if this story, this epic saga of warrior monks and a sacred chalice, is one of history's greatest illusions? What if the connection we take for granted is a myth born not from holy relics, but from poetry, politics, and the ashes of a tragic downfall? Tonight, we separate fact from fiction. We will not hunt for the Grail itself, but for the truth of its story. We will journey back to the age of Crusades, not in search of a cup, but to uncover what the Knights Templar really protected. The answer is a secret far more compelling and far more human than any legend. To find the Grail, our first stop is not the dusty archives of a Templar commandery, nor the sun-scorched earth of Jerusalem. It is in the damp, green mists of pre-Christian Europe. Long before the Last Supper, the Celtic and Welsh people told tales of magical vessels. They sang of the cauldron of Derwich the Giant, which would not boil meat for a coward, and the cauldron of Bron the Blessed, which could bring the dead back to life. These were not symbols of Christian piety. They were powerful metaphors for rebirth, abundance, and the mysterious forces of nature. They were objects of myth, not of faith. For the first 1,100 years of Christianity, the Holy Grail simply did not exist as a known relic. The early church fathers, meticulous in their cataloging of sacred objects, never mention it. Pilgrims flocked to see the true cross, the crown of thorns, and the bones of apostles, but no one journeyed to find the cup of Christ. It was a relic waiting to be invented. And invented, someone did. Let us imagine the scene. It is the late 12th century, somewhere in the courts of northern France. A poet, Chrétien de Troyes, sits in a chamber lit by the flickering dance of candlelight. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and beeswax. Outside, the world is one of feudal loyalties, brutal warfare, and burgeoning courtly romance. Commissioned by his patron, Philippe, Count of Flanders, Chrétien is weaving a new kind of story. He takes the raw material of old Welsh folklore about a foolish boy named Perceval and blends it with the new ideals of chivalry. In his unfinished masterpiece, Perceval, the Story of the Grail, he describes a strange and wondrous procession. His hero, in a mysterious castle, witnesses a young woman carrying a Graal. It is described as wide and deep, made of the purest gold and set with precious gems. It shines so brightly it dims the candles. But Chrétien never calls it holy. He never says it's the cup of the Last Supper. It is simply a Graal, a word that likely referred to a common wide serving dish. His hero, Perceval, fails to ask what it is, a failure of courtesy that has dire consequences. And there, with that question unasked, Chrétien de Troyes laid down his pen and died, leaving his story and the mystery of the Grail unfinished. He had no idea that in his candlelit room he had just given birth to one of history's most enduring legends. It was the poets who came after him who completed the transformation. The German knight Wolfram von Eschenbach, in his epic Parzival, reimagined the Grail not as a cup, but as a stone from heaven. A few decades later, in a vast collection of Arthurian tales known as the Vulgate cycle, the Grail was finally and definitively identified as the cup of the Last Supper, the very same vessel used to collect Christ's blood at the crucifixion. The myth was complete. A pagan cauldron had been baptized. A poet's mystery had become a sacred Christian relic. But all of this happened in the pages of romance, in the realm of fiction. So where do the Templars fit in? To answer that, we must leave the world of poetry and enter the harsh reality of the Crusader states.
The year is 1119. The First Crusade has been over for 2 decades, but the newly conquered Kingdom of Jerusalem is a fragile enterprise. The roads are treacherous, crawling with bandits. For the thousands of unarmed pilgrims flocking to the Holy City, the journey from the coast is a deadly gamble. It is in this climate of desperate need that a French knight, Hugh de Payenne, and 8 of his companions make a radical proposal to King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They will take the monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they will not spend their days in a cloister. They will live as monks, but they will remain warriors. Their sole purpose, to protect the pilgrims on the blood-soaked roads to Jerusalem. The king grants them a headquarters on the Temple Mount in a wing of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which the Crusaders believed to be the site of Solomon's temple. From this location, they take their name, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Knights Templar are born. Let us imagine a day in the life of a typical Templar brother in Jerusalem, far from the romanticized image of a Grail quest. His day begins not with a treasure map, but with the clang of a chapel bell before dawn, the sound mingling with the distant call to prayer from the minarets of the city and the clang of hammers from the armory. After prayers, his work begins. It is not a search for mystical relics, but the gritty, exhausting business of survival. He might spend the day escorting a nervous caravan of merchants and pilgrims through the Judean hills, the sun beating down on his chainmail, his eyes constantly scanning the rocky landscape for any sign of ambush. The air is thick with dust, the smell of horses, and the palpable fear of the people he protects. His duties are practical: ensure there is enough water, manage the pack animals, and be ready to draw his sword in a brutal, chaotic skirmish at a moment's notice. Or perhaps his day is spent within the walls of the Temple Mount compound, not in esoteric study, but in administration. He might be overseeing the accounts, for the Templars are pioneering what will become the world's first international banking system. A lord in London can deposit funds with the order and receive a letter of credit, which he can then cash in Jerusalem, a revolutionary concept that fuels the entire Crusader economy. The Templar is a warrior, yes, but he is also a logistician, an accountant, and a diplomat. His life is governed by a strict set of rules, the Latin Rule of the Templar Order, a document detailing every aspect of their lives, is our most crucial piece of evidence. It It dictates their prayers, their plain clothing, their communal meals eaten in silence. It outlines military strategy and financial discipline. And in its 72 clauses, there is not a single mention of the Holy Grail. There is no mandate to search for relics, no secret mission to guard a sacred cup. Their mission was brutally, relentlessly practical. Protect the living, not hunt for the artifacts of the dead. Their treasure wasn't a chalice. It was their network, their discipline, and their reputation for unshakable reliability. We are now separating the hard reality of the Templars from the poetic fiction of the Grail. It's a journey into the real secrets of the past. If you find this kind of deep dive into history as fascinating as we do, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue debunking myths and bringing these incredible stories to light. Now, let's explore how these two separate worlds, the poet's dream and the soldier's reality, collided.
So if the Grail was a literary invention, and the Templars were a pragmatic military order, how did the two become so powerfully intertwined? The answer lies in a simple accident of timing. The Grail romances, written by Chrétien de Troyes and others, exploded in popularity across Europe in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. This was the exact same period that the Knights Templar were at the absolute zenith of their power, wealth, and influence. They were the most famous military order in the world. Their white mantles were an iconic sight from the castles of Scotland to the battlefields of the Holy Grail. In the public imagination, who better to guard a mythical Christian treasure than Christianity's most elite and mysterious warriors? The stories never explicitly named the Templars as Grail Guardians. The Grail Knights of the legends, like the pure Sir Galahad, were spiritual ascetics, men who achieved the quest through prayer and piety alone. This was a stark contrast to the Templars, who were men of the world, engaged in warfare and finance. But for the medieval mind, the connection was too tempting to ignore. The Templars were the real-life equivalent of an elite brotherhood of knights, so they were mentally cast in the role. This vague association was fueled by the Templars' base of operations, the Temple Mount. For centuries, whispers and speculation had surrounded what lay beneath the ancient stones. Did the original 9 knights, during their first decade on the Mount, conduct excavations? Did they find something lost since the destruction of the first temple? Some theorized they found the Ark of the Covenant. Others lost sacred texts that gave them a secret knowledge. There was no concrete evidence for any of this, but the speculation itself was powerful. The idea that the Templars possessed a great secret found on the Temple Mount created a mystery. Over time, as the Grail legend grew, this undefined secret began to merge with the ultimate Christian secret, the Holy Grail. It was a slow, unconscious fusion of two powerful and independent myths. The Templars had a secret. The Grail was a secret. Therefore, the Templars' secret must be the Grail. It was a conclusion based on imagination, not on evidence. For 200 years, this connection remained a faint one, a thing of poetry and popular assumption. The Templars themselves never claimed to have the Grail. Their enemies never accused them of having it. It was a loose, romantic idea. But all of that was about to change in the most violent and dramatic way imaginable. The Order's downfall would provide the fertile ground in which the seeds of this myth would not just sprout, but grow into an unshakable legend. The end came with shocking brutality. At dawn on Friday, October 13th, 1307, agents of King Philip IV of France launched a coordinated raid across the entire kingdom. Every Templar, from the Grand Master Jacques de Molay
to the lowest serving brother was arrested. Let's step into that moment of chaos. Imagine a Templar commander in the French countryside. The commander is a man in his 50s, a knight who has spent his life divided between fighting in the East and managing the Order's farms and finances in Europe. He is awakened not by the familiar gentle ring of the chapel bell for morning prayers, but by the splintering crash of his chamber door. Royal soldiers, men he recognizes as servants of the king his order has faithfully served and funded, drag him from his bed. As he is led away in chains, past the stunned faces of his brothers, his entire world shatters. The shock, the confusion, the profound sense of betrayal is absolute. He and his order are not being treated as noble knights, but as criminals and heretics. The accusations leveled against them by King Philip's inquisitors were horrific and sensational. The Templars were charged with heresy, with denying Christ and spitting on the cross during their secret initiation ceremonies. They were accused of idolatry, of worshipping a mysterious bearded head known as Baphomet. They were charged with institutionalized sodomy and financial corruption. Under brutal torture, many knights confessed to these crimes. But here we come to the most important piece of evidence in our entire investigation. Amidst this long, detailed, and imaginative list of accusations, one charge is conspicuously absent. King Philip, a man desperate to legitimize his attack and seize the Order's immense wealth, never once accused the Knight Templars of possessing, hiding, or knowing the whereabouts of the Holy Grail. Let that sink in. If there was even a whisper of a rumor that the Templars held Christianity's most sacred and valuable relic, it would have been the first and most powerful charge against them. It would have been the ultimate justification for the king's actions. But it was never mentioned. Not by their accusers, not by the Pope, and not even by the tortured knights themselves in their forced confessions. The silence is deafening. In the moment of their greatest crisis, the historical record proves that the Templar Grail connection did not exist in any meaningful way. The order was officially disbanded by Pope Clement V in 1312. Grand Master Jacques de Molay, after retracting his confession, was burned at the stake in Paris in 1314. The Templars were gone. Their sudden, violent demise and the simultaneous seizure of their assets created a profound mystery. The order was fabulously wealthy, yet the French crown found far less liquid treasure in their vaults than they had expected. What happened to the Templar fleet that had sailed from the port of La Rochelle just before the arrests? What happened to their legendary treasure? History became a vacuum, and legend rushed in to fill it. The idea of a lost Templar treasure took root, and over the centuries it merged with that other great lost object of medieval romance. The Templars had a lost secret, and the Holy Grail was the most romantic, most powerful secret imaginable. Their persecution had not revealed their connection to the Grail. It had created it. It forged the myth. Their tragic end made them the perfect, silent guardians for a story that was now too powerful to die.
After the smoke cleared over Jacques de Molay's pyre, the Grail legend, along with the memory of the Templars, largely faded from the popular consciousness for several hundred years. The story was kept alive not by historians, but by a new and emerging force, the secret societies of the 18th century. During the Age of Enlightenment,
Groups like the Freemasons began to emerge, seeking to create moral systems and brotherhoods inspired by ancient traditions. They were fascinated by the Templars, seeing them as a model of a disciplined, elite order in possession of a hidden, esoteric knowledge. They adopted Templar imagery, ranks, and rituals. It was within these secretive lodges that the idea of the Templars as guardians of a great secret, often symbolized by the Grail, was resurrected and embellished. They weren't concerned with historical accuracy. They were building a philosophical lineage. This revival gave the legend a new life, which trickled from the lodges into popular culture. By the 19th and 20th centuries, novelists, artists, and filmmakers had seized upon the romantic image of the Templar Knight as Grail Guardian. And in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, this connection was cemented into the global consciousness by pop culture juggernauts. Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade gave us the unforgettable image of a centuries-old Templar knight guarding the Grail in a hidden temple. A few years later, Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code took the world by storm, weaving a thrilling narrative that reimagined the Grail not as a cup, but as a secret bloodline of Christ, protected for centuries by the Templars and their successors. Millions of people have absorbed their Templar history from these incredible works of fiction. And so the myth born in poetry and forged in tragedy became an undisputed fact in the court of public opinion. So, we return to our central question. What was the hidden truth of the Holy Grail? And what did the Knights Templar really protect? The historical evidence is clear and overwhelming. The Holy Grail began not as a sacred relic, but as a literary device in a medieval poem. It was a fiction, a powerful symbol that evolved over time. The Knights Templar, in contrast, were a very real and pragmatic institution. Their mission was to protect flesh and blood pilgrims and to manage a vast financial and military network. Their own extensive records and the records of their enemies show a complete and total absence of any connection to the Grail. The Knights Templar did not protect the Holy Grail. What they protected were the roads. They protected the pilgrims. They protected a fragile kingdom in the Holy Land. They protected a revolutionary system of international finance. And in the end, they were unable to protect themselves. The true secret, the hidden truth, is not about what they guarded, but about how their story became a vessel. The legend of the Holy Grail needed a guardian. It needed a brotherhood mysterious enough, powerful enough, and tragic enough to be worthy of the quest. The Knights Templar, with their silent vows, their immense wealth, and their dramatic, unjust end, became the perfect candidates. They are not the guardians of the Grail. They are the guardians of its story. Their tragic history became the empty tomb where the legend could be resurrected, more powerful than ever. The truth is that the greatest treasure the Templars left behind was not a cup, but a mystery. A mystery so profound that it allowed them to become the eternal keepers of a secret they never knew. The line between history and myth is often blurred, and the story of the Templars and the Grail is perhaps the most captivating example. What other historical mysteries do you think are misunderstood? What part of this story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them, and your insights help shape the stories we tell next. Thank you for watching.